Modifying a 5-inch gauge Great Western Railway 14XX steam locomotive. This is part 13. Fitting the injector water valves and repairing a mistake. In order to fit the water valves in the correct place, I temporarily had to fit the superstructure. This is the water valve and it goes under the floor. I'm going to fit a pair of these water valves, one at each side, because I'm going to fit 2 injectors to the engine, and each of the injectors requires its own water valve. And before I go any further, as usual, my disclaimer. Please note this is not a King Scale or Silvercrest model locomotive. The engine was bought directly from the manufacturer in China. So now that's out of the way, it's on with the job. What I have to do is figure out where to put the water valves so they're very accessible. And what I'm doing here is using a long screwdriver to make a mark in the paint on the running board, and that's where I will be drilling the hole to mount the injector water valve. At this stage I only need to mark one side because I'm going to just duplicate the measurements on the other side. They need to be mounted in such a place that there's plenty of room to get my fingers in to turn the valve, and these valves need to be fitted between the double frames at the back of the engine. Each injector will be mounted right at the back of the engine between the footstep and the buffer beam, so the injectors will always be visible to the driver. It's most important that you see the injector at all times, because when the water stops running it's injecting, but when the water's running it's not injecting, and if you can't see it you don't know what's happening. Currently I've drilled a pilot hole and I'm measuring the distance from each side, so I'm going to duplicate it on the other side. What I'm doing is making a small scratch mark with a scriber so I know where to drill the hole at the other side. But first of all, it's time to drill this hole 5/16 of an inch in diameter. But I'm using one drill size below 5/16 of an inch because I want to use a reamer to get the hole to be an accurate size. And that's really because sometimes when you drill holes of 5/16 and above into unsupported sheet metal, the hole is very uneven and not round. But by doing it this way, using one imperial size less than 5/16 to drill the hole, and then I ream the hole to the final size, and as you can see, if I can get the nut on, the valve fits perfectly in this 5/16 of an inch diameter hole. I'm temporarily fitting the stainless steel control rod because this needs to be set in a certain position. If you're doing a job like this, do not fasten the handle in place permanently, just in case you ever need to remove the water valve if it starts to leak. So now on the mark that I made at the other side, I'm drilling the hole the same way. I'm using some lubricating oil as well because it makes the drill cut better. So putting gentle pressure on, very soon the drill goes through the hole and then it's through with the reamer. And now I have another very cleanly finished hole in the footplate to mount the other valve. And here is the other valve. So I take it out of the plastic packet. And, shock horror, it won't fit. It's too close to one of the side frames. And why is it too close to one of the side frames? Because I've drilled the hole in the wrong place. Even though I measured it twice, I made a mistake. I must have used the wrong ruler. Or maybe I just used the wrong brain cell. But anyway, now the hole is in the wrong place, I'm going to drill another one. And as you can see, it's miles away from where I drilled the first hole. So why am I not crying and going, oh no, I've ruined the job? Well, if you look at some of the other parts of the footplate, particularly where it's been cut to fit around the boiler, that's pretty diabolical as well. And I didn't do that. Anyway, the good thing is I'm going to show you how to fix problems like this. It is not the end of the world. Plus, this locomotive is going to have a wooden floor, so it would be covered up, but that's not the point. I would always know there was a hole in the wrong place. Even though it's under the floor, I would know that it was all my doing. But looking on the bright side now, both of the water valves are fixed in the right place, and I just have to get rid of this hole. In this clip, I'm just checking the alignment of the water valves with a steel straight edge. You might like this next bit. First of all, I go over to the lathe and put a piece of steel in the chuck. What I'm going to do is make a plug. And this plug is going to be quite a precision item, because the hole in the footplate is reamed to 5/16 of an inch diameter, so I'm accurately turning this plug to also be 5/16 of an inch in diameter. I've removed the sharp edges with a file and now I'm parting the component off. I'm initially going to fit this plug into the footplate from underneath using some super glue. This is high viscosity super glue and currently it's stuck to my finger, but very quickly it goes into the hole and I remove my finger. And by remove my finger, I don't mean that I cut it off, I just mean I move my finger away from the vicinity of the plug. And now I'm going to use some of this absolutely wonderful stuff. This is JB Weld, and it was suggested to me by quite a few viewers a while back, so I bought some, and it really does do everything that it says on the packaging. Like normal epoxy resin, you just mix 2 equal amounts on a piece of scrap wood. Then you mix the 2 parts together for quite a long time until they're thoroughly mixed into like a grey paste. So here's a top tip, you may find this interesting. I'm not using it as a filler, so I'm not just splurging it all over the footplate. When I turned this plug in the lathe, I made it in such a way that it doesn't quite come to the top of the metal once it's pushed into the hole. That's because I want to do this. I'm persuading the JB Weld to go into every nook and cranny of the depression in the footplate, and for this I'm using a pin. This technique uses something called gravity, and because the JB Weld is basically a liquid, it will find its own level in the hole and sit perfectly flat, requiring an absolute minimum of rubbing down. And then when it's painted using a standard aerosol, there's only you and I watching this who know that there was ever a hole drilled in the wrong place. The black paint I use for this is satin black, and it's from a company called Hycote, Hycote, and it seems to be quite good paint, dries quickly, gives a good finish. Almost an invisible mend. It seems a pity to put the wood floor in there now, but I'm going to do that anyway. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found it useful.